The Browning automatic rifle kicked back against his shoulder. Again! Another German fell in the snow-covered field below. Alton Knappenberger did not think about becoming a legend. He thought about staying alive. The knoll where he lay offered no protection, only height. Every German gun within 300 yards could see him. Doctrine said, "Seek cover." Doctrine said, "Stay low." The 20-year-old farm boy from Spring Mount, Pennsylvania, did the opposite. It was February 1st, 1944. The Anzio beachhead in Italy had become a killing ground. Around Knappenberger, the bodies of American soldiers lay scattered across the frozen mud. Most of his company, 200 men, were already dead or dying. The German counterattack had torn through their positions with machine guns, mortars, and disciplined infantry tactics. This was supposed to be a routine push inland. It had become a massacre. Before we continue, subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling us where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring these forgotten stories to light. Knappenberger had 0 confirmed kills before this day. By 1400 hours, he would account for at least 60 German casualties. His tactic was not learned in any army manual. It came from the forests of Pennsylvania, from cold mornings waiting for deer in tree stands, from understanding how prey moves and how predators think. The road to that knoll began in Coopersburg, Pennsylvania, where Alton Warren Knappenberger was born on December 31, 1923. His father ran moonshine during Prohibition. At age 5, Alton watched his father die of a heart attack. The family struggled. Alton left school early and worked the land, pig farming, hard labor, under an indifferent sky. In March 1943, at 19 years old, the Army drafted him. He stood 5 feet 6 inches tall. He weighed 118 pounds. The recruiting sergeant probably looked at him and saw a boy who would not last long in combat. The sergeant was wrong. The Anzio gamble. The Allied invasion of Italy in 1943 had stalled. German forces held strong defensive positions across the mountainous peninsula. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring commanded German forces with skill and ruthlessness. Every ridge, every river crossing became a battleground, soaked in blood. The Gustav Line, anchored on Monte Cassino, blocked the road to Rome. American and British commanders needed a breakthrough. General Harold Alexander and General Mark Clark conceived Operation Shingle. The plan called for an amphibious landing at Anzio and Nettuno, 30 miles south of Rome, 60 miles behind German lines. 2 divisions would land, cut German supply routes, threaten Rome, and force Kesselring to pull troops from the Gustav Line. On paper, it looked bold. In reality, it used too few troops for such an ambitious objective. January 22, 1944. Dawn broke over calm seas. Landing craft carried the United States 3rd Infantry Division and British 1st Division toward the beaches. Major General Lucian Truscott commanded the American forces. With him came 3 battalions of elite Rangers, paratroopers from the 509th Parachute Infantry Battalion, and supporting tank units. The landings achieved complete tactical surprise. German defenders were minimal. By midnight, 36,000 soldiers and 3,200 vehicles sat ashore. Allied casualties, 13 killed, 97 wounded. The port of Anzio fell intact. Major General John Lucas commanded 6th Corps. His orders were ambiguous. Secure the beachhead. Advance if possible. Threaten the Alban Hills. Lucas was a cautious man. He looked at his 2 divisions, looked at the uncertain intelligence about German strength inland, and decided to consolidate. He did not push aggressively toward the Alban Hills or the key road junctions. For 2 days, Allied forces dug in and unloaded supplies while German reinforcements raced south. Kesselring reacted with characteristic energy. Within hours of the landing, he ordered units from across Italy to converge on Anzio. The Hermann Göring Fallschirm Panzer Division moved from southern Italy. The 3rd Panzer Grenadier Division came from Rome. The 715th Infantry Division deployed from France. Elements of at least 8 German divisions began forming a ring of steel around the shallow Allied beachhead. By late January, the beachhead measured 7 miles deep and 15 miles wide. German artillery occupied every hill overlooking Allied positions. Forward observers could see every vehicle, every foxhole, every supply dump. German gunners fired at will. A massive 280-millimeter railway gun, nicknamed Anzio Annie by the Americans, lobbed shells weighing 560 pounds into the crowded beachhead. Soldiers lived in waterlogged trenches. The soil drained poorly, every hole filled with freezing water within hours. There was no rear area. Everywhere was the front. The Ranger disaster General Lucas wanted to break the stalemate. He ordered an attack toward Cisterna di Littoria, a small town 5 miles inland. Cisterna sat on Highway 7, the main road to Rome. Capturing it would cut German supply lines and open space for Allied armor to maneuver. Lucas gave the mission to Colonel William Darby and his 3 Ranger battalions. Darby protested. Rangers were shock troops trained for raids and special operations, not sustained infantry combat. Lucas insisted. On the night of January 29th, the 1st and 3rd Ranger battalions, 767 men, began infiltrating toward Cisterna. They moved silently through irrigation ditches and across frozen fields. They reached within 800 yards of the town. Dawn came. The Rangers discovered they had infiltrated directly into a bivouac area occupied by an entire German motorized infantry division, reinforced by elements of the Hermann Göring Panzer Division and Italian paratroopers. The Germans surrounded them. Machine guns opened fire from multiple directions. The Rangers fought with desperate ferocity, but they had no support, no artillery, no armor. German tanks rolled through their positions. By midday, the ammunition ran out. Colonel Darby, monitoring the battle from the rear, listened to his radios fall silent one by one. Out of 767 Rangers, 6 made it back to Allied lines. 12 were killed in action. 36 were wounded and captured. 743 became prisoners of war. It was the worst single-day loss for American Rangers in World War II. The elite force effectively ceased to exist. General Mark Clark wrote in his diary that he was distressed to find the 3rd Division had led with the Rangers. The attack on Cisterna stalled. German forces counterattacked. The 3rd Infantry Division, Knappenberger's unit, found itself fighting for survival. Knappenberger's fight February 1st, 1944, the day after the Ranger disaster. The 3rd Infantry Division's 30th Infantry Regiment held positions near Cisterna. Knappenberger served as a private first class in the regiment. His company had pushed forward in support of another attack. They moved across open farmland, approaching German defensive positions. The German machine gun opened fire without warning. The first burst killed 3 Americans instantly. The sound of the MG-42 ripped through the cold air, a mechanical scream firing 1,200 rounds per minute. The rest of the patrol dove for cover. There was no real cover, just shallow depressions in the frozen earth that barely concealed a man lying prone. Then the 2nd MG-42 opened fire from the left, then the 3rd from the right. The Americans were caught in a triangulated kill zone. German tactics were textbook perfect. Interlocking fields of fire, camouflaged positions, disciplined fire control. Men screamed and died in the mud. Knappenberger saw a soldier fall near him, killed instantly. The man had been carrying a Browning automatic rifle. The bar was a 20-pound air-cooled automatic weapon, firing 30-caliber rounds from a 20-round magazine. It was more portable than a machine gun, more powerful than a standard M1 Garand rifle. Knappenberger crawled forward, bullets snapping over his head with supersonic cracks, and grabbed the bar. He looked around. The patrol was pinned down. Every man who tried to move drew immediate fire. Officers shouted orders, but there was nowhere to go. German mortars began dropping rounds into the area. The explosions threw frozen dirt and shrapnel. More Americans died. Knappenberger saw a knoll 50 yards to his right. It rose perhaps 10 feet above the surrounding terrain, not much. But from that height, he would have clear lines of sight to the German positions. Every hunting instinct he had developed in Pennsylvania forests told him the same thing: get above your target. He crawled. Bullets struck the ground around him. He crawled faster. He reached the base of the knoll and scrambled up. He rolled over the crest and came up on one knee. The bar settled against his shoulder. He could see 2 of the German machine gun nests now, partially concealed by brush and sandbags, but visible from his elevated position. He fired a burst at the nearest MG-42 position, 4 rounds, 5. The German gunner slumped. The gun fell silent. The German loader looked up, searching for the shooter. Knappenberger fired again. The loader went down. MG-42 nest number 1 was silenced. The Germans in the other positions saw the shooting. They identified Knappenberger on the knoll. Both remaining MG-42s swung toward him. A storm of bullets tore through the air. 7.92mm rounds snapped past with violent cracks. The Germans were firing tracer rounds now, phosphorus-tipped bullets that left visible trails, every 5th round glowing red as it streaked toward the knoll. Knappenberger did not move. He shifted his aim to the second machine gun nest. He could see the muzzle flashes. He fired short bursts, 3 to 4 rounds each, walking his fire onto the target. The bar bucked in his hands, spent casings ejected, and tumbled down the slope. The second MG-42 stopped firing. Knappenberger had hit the crew. Now take a moment to like this video and share it with someone interested in military history. These stories deserve to be remembered. German infantry tried to reinforce the machine gun positions. Knappenberger saw movement in the field below, gray-clad soldiers running in a crouch, carrying ammunition boxes and rifles. He fired. 1 German fell. He fired again. Another went down. The rest dove for cover. Knappenberger kept firing at any movement. His magazine emptied. He ejected it, pulled a fresh magazine from his belt, slammed it home, and resumed firing. The third machine gun nest was still operational, firing from Knappenberger's left. He could not get a clean angle on it from his current position. German riflemen were firing at him now, individual shots, mixed with the machine gun bursts. A bullet struck the ground 6 inches from his left hand. Another whistled past his head. He ignored them. He focused on targets. 2 German soldiers tried to maneuver closer with grenades. Knappenberger saw them moving through a shallow ditch. He waited. Patience was a hunter's virtue. The first grenadier rose to throw. Knappenberger fired a burst. 4 rounds. The grenadier fell backward. The grenade dropped at his feet and detonated. The second grenadier hesitated, then tried anyway. He stood, arm coming back. Knappenberger fired again. The second grenadier collapsed. His grenade exploded harmlessly 15 meters away. Knappenberger checked his ammunition. 3 rounds left in the current magazine. 2 full magazines remaining on his belt. 43 rounds total. He was firing faster than he could resupply. He looked down the slope behind him. More dead Americans lay there. Some would have ammunition. He slid down the back of the knoll, staying below the crest to avoid German fire. He crawled to the nearest body. The man had been a squad mate, killed in the initial ambush. Knappenberger searched the body quickly, pulling magazines and ammunition pouches. He crawled to another body. More magazines. He made 3 trips, gathering everything he could carry. By the time he crawled back up the knoll, he had over 600 rounds. The lone defender. The German attack intensified. Enemy officers had identified the knoll as the key defensive position. If they could eliminate Knappenberger, they could overrun the surviving Americans. A squad of German infantry advanced, using fire and movement tactics. Half the squad fired, while the other half moved forward in short rushes. Knappenberger watched them come. He let them get within 80 yards. Then he opened fire. The bar hammered out bursts of 3 to 4 rounds. Germans dropped. The advance stalled. The survivors sought cover behind a low stone wall. Knappenberger kept firing at the wall, forcing them to stay down. When one German raised his head to look, Knappenberger fired. The head disappeared in a red mist. The third machine gun nest tried to provide covering fire. Knappenberger shifted his aim and fired a long burst at the muzzle flashes. 20 rounds poured into the German position. The MG-42 went silent. Knappenberger had either killed the crew or forced them to take cover. Either way, the gun was out of action. More German infantry came forward. They advanced from multiple directions now, trying to flank the knoll. Knappenberger rotated his position, firing in different directions, engaging each threat as it appeared. His shooting was calm, methodical. He did not spray bullets wildly. Each burst was aimed, controlled. This was how he had hunted deer: steady hands, controlled breathing, precise trigger control. A German officer appeared behind the assault troops, shouting orders and waving soldiers forward. Knappenberger saw him. He aimed carefully and fired a single burst. The officer fell. The German infantry hesitated. Without their officer, the cohesion broke. Some soldiers took cover, others began pulling back. 90 minutes had passed since Knappenberger first climbed the knoll. His hands were numb from the cold and from gripping the bar. His shoulder ached from the recoil. His ears rang from the constant gunfire. Around him, the snow-covered fields were littered with German bodies. The count would come later. For now, he just kept shooting. American forces began to regroup behind him. A lieutenant crawled up to the knoll and looked at Knappenberger in disbelief. The kid was still alive, still fighting. The lieutenant called for artillery support. American gunners miles behind the lines began dropping shells on the German positions. The high explosive rounds exploded among the enemy infantry, killing and scattering them. Knappenberger continued firing. He saw a German soldier trying to drag a wounded comrade to safety. He let them go. He focused on active threats, soldiers carrying weapons and moving aggressively. His ammunition was running low again. He had fired over 400 rounds. He crawled down the back of the knoll once more and collected ammunition from more American casualties. It was grim work, but necessary. The German attack lost momentum. Their casualties were mounting. The machine gun nests were destroyed. Infantry squads were pinned down or retreating. German commanders called off the assault. The survivors pulled back, dragging their wounded and leaving their dead in the frozen fields. When silence finally settled, Knappenberger descended from the knoll. His legs were shaking. His hands trembled. He set the bar down and sat in the mud, breathing hard. Other soldiers approached him slowly, staring. He looked like a ghost, caked in mud, his uniform torn, his face blackened by powder residue. The aftermath American officers counted German bodies in front of the knoll and throughout the surrounding area. 20 to 25 corpses lay directly in front of Knappenberger's position. Another 35 to 40 bodies, or evidence of wounded evacuated by the Germans, were found in the machine gun nests and approach routes. The total came to approximately 60 German casualties, confirmed dead or seriously wounded, all attributed to one 20-year-old private first class with a borrowed bar. Only 6 men from Knappenberger's 200-man company survived the engagement without being killed or wounded. Knappenberger was one of them. His small physique, just 5 feet 6 inches and 118 pounds, had presented a minimal target. German bullets passed over him or around him. Luck played a role, but so did skill and courage. The battle around Anzio continued. The beachhead remained under siege. German artillery hammered Allied positions daily. The Luftwaffe bombed the harbor. Soldiers lived in mud and terror. On February 16th, the Germans launched Operation Fish Fang, the fish catch, a major counteroffensive involving 6 divisions. The attack nearly pushed Allied forces into the sea. American and British reserves counterattacked and held the line, but casualties were horrific. In 4 days, Allies suffered 3,500 casualties, Germans 5,400. Knappenberger remained in a foxhole near where the February 1st action had occurred. He did not know he was about to receive the Medal of Honor. An officer came to his position and told him General Mark Clark, commander of Fifth Army, would present the medal. On May 26, 1944, later sources say, June 8th, General Clark pinned the Medal of Honor on Private First Class Alton Knappenberger. American troops stood in formation. The regimental band played. Clark called Knappenberger a one-man army. The citation read that Knappenberger, alone and exposed, had harassed attacking Germans with his automatic rifle until he ran out of ammunition, preventing serious losses to his unit in a battle where every officer and non-commissioned officer in his company became a casualty. The Italian campaign ground forward. On May 23, 1944, Allied forces broke out from Anzio. 1,500 artillery pieces opened fire at 05:45. 40 minutes later, aircraft struck German positions. Then infantry and armor advanced. The 1st Armored Division lost 100 tanks on the first day. The 3rd Infantry Division suffered 955 casualties. German defenses crumbled slowly, village by village, hill by hill. Rome fell on June 4, 1944, 2 days before D-Day in Normandy, but the Italian victory was overshadowed by the larger invasion of France. The Gothic line farther north awaited. The war in Italy would continue until May 1945, grinding and brutal to the end. Knappenberger survived the war. He returned to Pennsylvania and tried to resume a normal life. He worked on farms again. He did not speak much about the war. Veterans rarely did. The memories were too heavy. He had done what needed doing, nothing more. The weapon that saved a company. The Browning automatic rifle was designed by John Moses Browning near the end of World War I. It fired the standard .30 caliber .06 Springfield cartridge, the same round used in the M1 Garand rifle. The bar could fire semi-automatic, 1 round per trigger pull, or full automatic at 550 rounds per minute. It weighed nearly 20 pounds fully loaded and measured 47 inches long. A 20-round detachable box magazine fed from underneath. The bar served as the squad automatic weapon for American infantry. Each rifle squad had 1 bar gunner. The weapon provided suppressive fire while riflemen maneuvered. It was less cumbersome than a belt-fed machine gun, but more powerful than individual rifles. In skilled hands, it was devastatingly effective. Knappenberger proved that on February 1st, 1944. The weapon had limitations. The 20-round magazine emptied quickly in automatic fire. Reloading took precious seconds. The barrel could overheat with sustained fire, though the cold Italian winter helped with that. The bipod at the front could be deployed for stability, but Knappenberger fired mostly from the shoulder, using his body to absorb recoil. After the war, Knappenberger kept the bar as his fondest possession. Photographs show him cleaning the weapon, running a cloth through the barrel, checking the action. That rifle had saved his life and the lives of his remaining squad mates. It had turned a farm boy into a legend. The Italian stalemate. The Anzio landings were supposed to change the Italian campaign. Instead, they became a months-long siege. Both sides took 20,000 casualties in a battlefield the size of a suburban neighborhood. German artillery dominated the beachhead. Anzio Annie, the massive railway gun, could fire from positions near Rome and drop shells anywhere in the Allied perimeter. Soldiers called it the Anzio Express. The shells arrived without warning, massive explosions that vaporized anyone nearby. German observers on the Alban Hills watched every Allied movement. Forward observers directed artillery fire with brutal precision. Supply dumps exploded. Field hospitals were hit. Even the harbor came under fire. Ships unloading supplies faced shells and aerial bombs. The Luftwaffe fielded Heinkel He-177 bombers equipped with Fritz X guided bombs and Henschel HS-293 missiles. Allied naval vessels took damage. The invasion fleet that had arrived virtually unopposed now fought for survival. Static warfare clamped down. Soldiers dug deeper. Trenches became elaborate networks. The soggy ground defied drainage efforts. Men stood in freezing water, feet rotting with trench foot, waiting for the next German attack or the next Allied offensive. Neither side could force a decision. The beachhead held, but barely. The Germans could not push the Allies into the sea, but the Allies could not break out. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring commanded German forces in Italy with considerable skill. He had fought delaying actions throughout the peninsula, making the Allies pay for every mile. At Anzio, he came close to achieving a major victory. His counterattacks in February pushed Allied forces to the breaking point. Only desperate defensive fighting, massive artillery support, and Allied air superiority prevented disaster. The human cost beyond the statistics and tactics, Anzio was a human catastrophe. Soldiers on both sides endured conditions that broke men mentally and physically. The constant shelling never allowed rest. Sleep came in brief intervals, interrupted by explosions and screams. Rations were cold, water was contaminated, medical care was limited. Wounded men waited hours or days for evacuation under fire. The Rangers who died at Cisterna were elite troops, volunteers trained for the hardest missions. In one day, 3 battalions ceased to exist. 761 men killed or captured out of 767 committed. The 6 survivors carried the story back. Colonel Darby never recovered from the loss. He would be killed by German artillery in April 1945, just weeks before the war ended. The 3rd Infantry Division, Knappenberger's unit, fought throughout the Italian campaign. They landed in North Africa in 1942, invaded Sicily in 1943, landed at Salerno, and fought up the Italian boot. Anzio was one more battle in a long series. They would fight until the German surrender in May 1945. The division suffered over 25,000 casualties during World War II. Knappenberger's company lost 194 men killed or wounded on February 1st. 6 survived unharmed. Those numbers reflect the intensity of German defensive fire and the desperation of the fighting. Companies that started the day at full strength ended as scattered survivors huddled in foxholes. German casualties were equally severe. The divisions committed to the Anzio counteroffensive lost thousands of men. The 14th Army, which Kesselring assembled to contain the beachhead, suffered over 20,000 casualties by the end of February. Young German soldiers, many barely trained, were fed into the meat grinder. They fought with courage and discipline, but the attrition was unsustainable. The legacy of one man, what Alton Knappenberger did on February 1st, 1944, defied military logic. Doctrine emphasized cover and concealment. Infantry tactics stressed coordinated fire and movement. A single soldier exposing himself on high ground should have been killed within minutes. Knappenberger survived for 90 minutes, killed at least 60 enemy soldiers, and broke a German counterattack that should have overrun his position. His success came from unconventional thinking. He applied hunting skills to combat. A deer hunter waits in elevated positions because game animals watch for threats at ground level. They rarely look up. German infantry trained to watch for enemy soldiers in trenches and behind cover did not expect a lone rifleman on a knoll firing down at them. The psychological impact was significant. The Germans knew someone was killing them from an exposed position, but could not effectively counter it. Their suppressive fire failed because Knappenberger made himself a small, moving target. The BR gave him the firepower he needed. A bolt-action rifle would not have provided enough volume of fire. A machine gun would have been too heavy and required a crew. The bar was the perfect compromise, portable, powerful, rapid firing. Knappenberger's marksmanship, honed by years of hunting, allowed him to make every burst count. He did not waste ammunition. He did not panic. He shot like he was back in Pennsylvania, waiting for deer. His physical size, which might have seemed a disadvantage, actually helped him. At 5 feet 6 inches and 118 pounds, he was a difficult target. He could move quickly, drop flat, and fit into spaces larger men could not. German riflemen firing at him often shot high, expecting a taller target. The Medal of Honor citation emphasized that Knappenberger's actions prevented serious losses to his outfit. Without his defense of the knoll, the German attack would have overwhelmed the remaining American survivors. The company would have been annihilated. Instead, enough men survived to hold the position until reinforcements arrived. One man made the difference between total defeat and costly survival. After the war, Knappenberger returned to Pennsylvania after his discharge. He married and had children. He worked various jobs, mostly manual labor. The Medal of Honor opened some doors, but he was not interested in fame. He avoided publicity. When people asked about the war, he gave short answers. What happened at Anzio stayed in his memory, private and painful. Many veterans struggled with what would later be called post-traumatic stress disorder, the nightmares, the flashbacks, the inability to relate to people who had not experienced combat. Knappenberger suffered like many others. He had killed 60 men in 90 minutes. He had watched friends die around him. Those memories did not fade. He attended veteran reunions occasionally, meeting other men from the 3rd Infantry Division. Those gatherings provided some comfort. Only other combat veterans understood. They did not need to explain to each other. They knew. Knappenberger lived a long life. He died in 2008 at age 84. His obituaries recounted his Medal of Honor action, but they could not capture the full experience, the cold, the fear, the exhaustion, the weight of the bar in his hands and the recoil against his shoulder, the faces of the Germans he killed, the bodies of the Americans he stepped over to gather ammunition. The Historical Society of Montgomery County in Pennsylvania honored his memory. Local historians ensured his story remained part of the record. He was one of over 460 men awarded the Medal of Honor during World War II. Each citation represented extraordinary courage. Each recipient carried scars, visible and invisible. The broader context of Anzio. The Battle of Anzio remains controversial among military historians. The landings achieved tactical surprise but lacked strategic vision. General John Lucas has been criticized for excessive caution in the initial days, but he also faced unclear orders and insufficient forces. Winston Churchill famously said, "I had hoped we were hurling a wildcat onto the shore, but all we got was a stranded whale." The operation tied down significant German forces, preventing their deployment elsewhere. Kesselring committed 8 divisions to contain Anzio, divisions that could have reinforced the Gustav Line or opposed the Normandy invasion. From that perspective, Anzio served a strategic purpose, even if it did not achieve its original objectives. The human cost was staggering relative to the size of the battlefield. Over 70,000 Allied casualties, including 7,000 killed, 36,000 wounded, and 44,000 sick or injured. German casualties exceeded 25,000. All this on a beachhead 7 miles deep and 15 miles wide. The breakout in late May 1944 finally vindicated the operation. Allied forces pushed north, liberated Rome, and pursued German forces toward the Gothic Line. But the victory came at immense cost and months later than planned. The Italian campaign never received the resources or attention of the Normandy invasion. It was always the secondary front, grinding forward with insufficient support. Before we conclude, please subscribe if you have not already, and share your thoughts in the comments. These stories matter. These men deserve to be remembered. The nature of heroism. What makes someone a hero? Training plays a role, Knappenberger had basic infantry training, but nothing prepared him specifically for what he did on February 1st. Equipment matters. The bar gave him the tools he needed, but ultimately, heroism comes from decision-making under impossible stress. Knappenberger chose to climb that knoll. He chose to stay exposed. He chose to keep fighting when every survival instinct screamed at him to hide. Those choices were not irrational. He assessed the situation and understood that someone had to stop the German attack or everyone would die. He decided that someone would be him. Military historians study such actions to understand combat leadership and small unit tactics. But the truth is, most heroic actions defy analysis. They happen in moments of chaos driven by training, instinct, and personal character. Knappenberger did not think about becoming a legend. He thought about the next target, the next magazine, the next burst of fire. He focused on the immediate and practical. The soldiers who witnessed his action struggled to explain it. How does one man hold off a German counterattack? How does he survive 90 minutes of concentrated fire? The answers are both simple and complex. He shot straight. He kept moving. He did not panic. He had the physical skills and mental toughness required. Most importantly, he refused to give up. Conclusion: Alton Warren Knappenberger joined the Army as a reluctant draftee from a Pennsylvania pig farm. He stood 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 118 pounds. Nothing about him suggested he would become one of the most decorated soldiers of World War II. But on February 1, 1944, on a frozen knoll near Cisterna, Italy, he became something more than a farm boy. He became the man who would not break. The German attack that should have annihilated his company failed because one soldier with a Browning automatic rifle decided to fight from an exposed position. Doctrine said it was suicide. Knappenberger did it anyway. 60 German casualties later, the attack collapsed. The beachhead held. The company survived. Barely. He received the Medal of Honor from General Mark Clark in front of assembled troops while the regimental band played. The citation praised his courage and effectiveness. But Knappenberger knew the truth. He had been terrified. He had not felt brave. He had simply done what needed doing, the same way he approached every hard task in his life. You put your head down and worked until the job was finished. The war ended. Knappenberger went home. He worked. He raised a family. He carried the memories of Anzio until his death in 2008. The knoll where he fought is still there, part of Italian farmland now, peaceful and quiet. Nothing marks the spot where a 20-year-old kid from Pennsylvania became a legend. But the story survives, passed down through military history, through veteran organizations, through records kept by historians who understand that such acts deserve remembrance. War creates circumstances where ordinary people must make extraordinary choices. Most fail, some survive. A very few become legends. Alton Warren Knappenberger was all three. He was an ordinary farm boy thrust into war. He survived through skill and courage. He became a legend because when death surrounded him and every rational choice said to hide, he climbed a knoll, picked up a rifle, and fought like a man who refused to die. That refusal, that stubborn determination to keep fighting when fighting seemed pointless, saved lives and broke an enemy attack. It earned him the Medal of Honor. More importantly, it earned him a place in the small circle of warriors whose actions transcend the moment and become timeless examples of what humans can accomplish when pushed beyond all reasonable limits. The Battle of Anzio lasted from January to June 1944. Thousands of men fought and died on that narrow beachhead. But on February 1st, for 90 minutes on an exposed knoll, one soldier with a borrowed rifle became the difference between survival and annihilation. That is why we remember Alton Warren Knappenberger, not because he wanted glory, but because when his moment came, he did not hesitate. He climbed, he fought, he won.